There is a moment, just before sunrise, when the world holds its breath. The water is still. The light has not yet decided what color it wants to be. And if you are very quiet, if you sit still enough, you can feel something settle inside you. Natalie Wood knew that feeling. She had spent years running from it. By the time she was in her early 40s, Natalie Wood had lived more lives than most people could imagine. She had been famous since she was a child, a little girl with dark eyes and a serious face who somehow made you feel, watching her, that she understood something the rest of us were still working out. She had made films that people still talk about. She had been loved, and she had lost love, and she had found it again. She had raised daughters. She had sat through nights when the world felt too large, and the walls felt too close. And she had carried, for almost her entire life, a fear that she rarely spoke about out loud. She was afraid of dark water. It was not a small fear. It was the kind of fear that lives in your body, not just your mind. The kind that finds you even when you are not thinking about it, when you are standing on a boat dock watching the light on the surface, or in a dream where the ground beneath your feet suddenly becomes something that will not hold you. People who knew her well said she had felt it since childhood, that there had been a moment, early, when someone had told her, perhaps a woman who seemed to see things others could not, or perhaps it was just a fear that grew without a clear beginning, that dark water would be part of her story. For years, the fear made her careful. She did not love the ocean the way people who live in California are supposed to. She kept her distance when she could. And when she could not, when the work required it, or the people she loved wanted to be near the water, she went anyway. But she held herself tightly. And then, in the last few years of her life, something began to shift. Those who were close to her in that time, her husband, her friends, her daughters, noticed that she seemed to be searching for something. Not in a restless way, not in the way she had searched when she was younger, and the searching felt urgent, even desperate. This was quieter than that. She had begun to read more, to sit with questions instead of pushing them away. She had a faith that she held privately, not loudly, not as something she announced, but as something she returned to, quietly, when the day had been long and the night was coming. She believed that life had a shape she could not fully see, that the years she had lived were not random, that even the fear, even that old, specific, water-dark fear, was somehow part of a pattern she was still learning to read. She talked in those years about wanting more time, not more fame, not more films, though she loved the work. Time. Time with her daughters when they were still young enough to want her close. Time with Robert, her husband, who had come back into her life after years apart, and who she had chosen again, this time differently. This time with something she had not had before: patience. She talked about wanting to see what her daughters would become, about wanting to be there for the ordinary things, the school plays, the skinned knees, the first heartbreaks that she would somehow have to help them survive, the small, necessary things. She was making plans, real ones. The kind you only make when you have decided, somewhere inside yourself, to trust that the future is worth moving toward. That is a kind of faith, not the kind that requires certainty, not the kind that promises you how everything will turn out. The kind that simply says, I cannot see all the way to the end, but I will take the next step anyway. She had spent so many years afraid of dark water. And in her final years, she was learning, slowly, quietly, imperfectly, to sit near it anyway, to look at it without flinching, to let it be what it was, and to still believe that she was safe. Maybe you have felt something like this too. Not a fear of water, necessarily, but a fear of something uncertain, something you cannot see the shape of, something that lives in the back of your mind and visits you at night when the quiet comes and the distractions fall away. Maybe it is the future itself that frightens you, the years still ahead, however many they are, and the uncertainty of what they will bring, the health questions you are holding, the relationship that feels unsteady, the loss you are still carrying, or the one you fear is coming. Maybe you have been standing at the edge of something, a decision, a conversation, a change, and you cannot make yourself step forward because you cannot see where it leads. That is such a human thing to feel. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling it. But here is what Natalie Wood was learning in those last quiet years. You do not need to see the whole road. You do not need certainty. You do not need a guarantee that everything will be all right, because no one can give you that. Not really. What you need is just enough trust to take the next step, and then the one after that. She had feared dark water for decades, and she had lived anyway. She had loved anyway. She had made things and raised children and chosen again and again to move forward even when she could not see exactly where she was going. That is what faith looks like in a life. Not the grand declaration, not the sudden certainty, but the small daily choice to keep moving, to sit down for breakfast with your family, to make the phone call you have been putting off, to say the words that need to be said, even though you do not know exactly how they will land, to look at the uncertain water and stay near it anyway. If you are watching this tonight, maybe there is something in your life that you have been keeping your distance from, not because it is bad, not because you do not want it, but because you are afraid of what it might ask of you, or afraid of how it might end, or afraid of simply not knowing. Natalie Wood was 43 years old when she died, and in the years before that, the years she was choosing, quietly, to stop letting the fear decide for her. She was learning to trust. Not because she had answers, not because the fear was gone, but because she had decided that the life ahead of her was worth moving toward. The life ahead of you is worth moving toward. I want to say that again because it matters. The life ahead of you is worth moving toward. You do not have to have it figured out. You do not have to feel ready. You do not have to know how the story ends. You only have to take the next step. Maybe that step is a conversation you have been avoiding. Maybe it is a small act of forgiveness toward someone else or toward yourself. Maybe it is simply letting yourself rest tonight, instead of lying awake trying to solve the unsolvable. Maybe it is just deciding, quietly, before you sleep, I do not need all the answers tonight. I only need to trust that tomorrow is still worth waking up for. That is enough. That has always been enough. Natalie Wood sat by windows sometimes, the people who loved her said. She liked the light. She liked to look out at whatever was there, the garden, the hills, the water in the distance, and just be still for a moment. Not performing, not being watched, just present. Just a woman sitting with her thoughts and her hopes and the quiet belief that what was ahead of her still mattered. There is something she might offer, if she could, to someone like you. Someone watching this in the quiet of their evening, holding their own uncertainties, wondering about their own tomorrow. You do not have to be certain. You only have to be here. Keep moving toward the light. The water is quieter than you think. Take a slow breath. Let that sit for a moment. The life ahead is still full. Move toward it.